Welcome to the 1905 podcast with your hosts Joe Kevin and Chris Sheen. Joe and I have been going to Stamford Bridge for over 30 years. This podcast takes you inside our unfiltered voice notes on all things Chelsea, sharing our view from Gate 13 of the Matthew Harding stand. Let's hit the notes. In this episode, we preview this weekend's game with Leicester. Joe and I pick our all-time Chelsea Shithousery XI, and we get the perspective on the season so far from 90s Chelsea guru Chris Wright. Let's start with our thoughts on the trip to the King Power Stadium on Saturday lunchtime. Leicester on Saturday lunchtime, and I don't know about everyone else, but I cannot wait. Most fans hate the international break, don't they? And yeah, it feels like ages ago that we played, weirdly. It hasn't been that long, obviously, but yeah, really looking forward to the game. Seeing Chelsea back in action. And side note, can you actually believe that we have just gone beyond the November international break and Chelsea still don't have a shirt sponsor? That is just incredible, and maybe one for another podcast. But yeah, big game, obviously, after the recent run of very difficult games we talked about in the last podcast, and we came through it, you could almost say unscathed, really. Like, it was pretty solid without being spectacular. A win, obviously, against Newcastle, defeat at Liverpool both by tight margins, and then two draws, which kind of you end up with a slightly different feeling from Old Trafford and Arsenal, didn't you? But overall, not bad. But now, with the run of games that we've got coming up into the new year, we really need to sort of put the foot down on the accelerator and show that we are, a real team, and a team that actually is finally getting a bit of credit in the media. I think people are slowly coming around to what we said at the start of the season, Joe. We were pretty confident in our position that Chelsea would finish top four. And at the moment, it's looking good, but there's a long way to go, as we know. In terms of the international break, when I'm recording this, most of the games have been played, and actually Chelsea players have done quite well. Kind of the best example for us probably being Neto, who scored a really great goal for Portugal, and we're big fans of him. Talked about it many times, but it was a really good example of something I've talked about before, about how two-footed he is. Obviously, we saw him score a great goal against Arsenal on his left foot, and this goal, he was playing on the right-hand side, and he actually flipped it to his right-hand side and absolutely smashed it in the near post. So he really is a really good threat on both sides, and it'll be very interesting to see where he starts at the weekend, because the other guy who probably had the pick of the international breaks for Chelsea was actually Noni Madueke, who's very good in both England games and is probably the one that at the moment you would say we'd be looking at maybe bringing out of the team this weekend. But yeah, that'll be one to watch. I think it could be very interesting. I have a personal preference on this, which I might as well put out there. I would change it up and I'd start Palmer on the right. Let's give Nkunku a go in the number 10 and then keep Neto on the left. That would be my personal preference. We've seen Palmer being man-marked time and time again. That's what Leicester will plan to do. They'll plan to have someone sticking on him, you're almost certain. The second we change that up and put him on the right, where we saw him so effective last season, he can drift, kind of go where he wants from the right-hand side. I think that would be an interesting kind of change of pace in a game like that, which we could probably experiment with and get away with. But I don't think that's what we'll see. To be fair, I think it will be most of the team are standing in just that kind of one or two, varied decisions at fullback, who gets the nod, and then likewise on the wing, where do we see like a Mudryk, Sancho, or João Felix or something like that. So who knows? But it's the lunchtime game, obviously, and always it's a dangerous game, isn't it, after international break, particularly for clubs like Chelsea who have so many players out on international duty. Obviously, we had a few less than maybe is typical this time, because the likes of Cole Palmer and Colwill were obviously left behind, which was very useful for us. People like Reece James obviously didn't go. Fofana didn't go either. So actually, quite a lot of the starters won't have travelled for the last 2 weeks, which would be potentially good for us. But lunchtime game, away from home, definitely can't take it lightly. And somewhere like the King Power, if Leicester start well and the atmosphere gets going, it can become a very difficult place quite quickly. So Chelsea will need to be conscious of that, particularly with, obviously, Enzo Maresca making his return to Leicester. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of reception he'll get, actually. But you'd like to think it would be favourable, but Fans never like seeing someone leave the club, do they? Let's be fair. A couple of other bits that people might have missed in the news, but I thought were interesting about players that I've mentioned. One was, there was a lot said after Noni Madueke came off in the Arsenal game and he stormed straight down the tunnel. And everyone was like really talking about that a lot, saying it shows his bad attitude and all this sort of stuff. Well, it turns out he came out and said actually just went to the toilet and then went back to the dugout. So it's amazing how quickly these stories can catch fire on social media, isn't it? And then it becomes this big thing and it would turn out he just needed a piss. So there you go. And then the one that's come out today is just not a brilliant source, but a few rumours about how Sancho is settling in and his attitude not being that impressive to some of the Chelsea players. So worth mentioning, but I think until we see, whether that's a legitimate source or not, the story was saying that Chelsea were looking to cancel his loan and send him back to Man United. But I just wonder if people are putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5 when it comes to him not playing recently. Whereas I think he's actually been ill and then had a bit of a knock. So again, he'll be one to watch on Saturday of how involved he is, because if he isn't involved again, you start to think these rumours start to carry a little bit of momentum, don't they? But equally, could very well start and then it's all silenced very quickly. Right, so I'm going to hand over now, as we always do, to a member of the opposition. And we're going to have it's the third time he's been on the podcast. We asked him to come on our very first episode as a big Leicester fan to tell us what he thought of Enzo Maresca. He came on again to tell us about Dewsbury Hall. He told us that Maresca would struggle and that Dewsbury Hall would be fantastic. So we've got an expert coming on board, but he's an absolute legend, one of my very best friends, and you may know him from being a social media and comedy star, and his name is Henry Rowley. So over to you, Henry, and let us know, to start off with, are you surprised by the start that Maresca has made at Chelsea?
So, in terms of Maresca's start at Chelsea, people who have listened to the previous episode that I was on will know that I know fuck all about football, apparently. I said something like, I think he was going to get exposed as a fraud. And actually, he's come into like the chaos that was Chelsea at the start of the season. No one even gave him a second look, really. Everyone was like, apart from you guys, everyone was like, yeah, they're screwed. And look what he's done. He steadied the ship. He made some bold calls, and I think it really worked. So fair. I am surprised by it, but fair enough. Like he's obviously knows what he's doing, and you guys are playing good football, and you look threatening, and you're in a good position. I think at the start of the season, I don't know. Well, I can't speak for you, but if I was a Chelsea fan, I would have definitely taken this, and it's the sign that it's moving forward in a positive direction. So I think it's been a really good start to the season, really. Yeah. I am surprised, though. It was not what I expected, but I'm hesitant to sort of make any sort of predictions now, because I think so far every time I've got it just horrendously wrong. So my next prediction is that Chelsea win the league and Leicester get relegated, in the hope that neither of those things happen. I'm not surprised that Dewsbury Hall isn't getting game time. I think you look at that squad, like, he's an unbelievable player. I do think what I'm more surprised about is that they signed him in the first place, because Maresca obviously came over from Leicester, knows Dewsbury Hall, knows about his game. And so it's a little bit weird that he would sign him knowing that he doesn't really have a place in that team. But if you look at the squad and the players in that position, I think it just wasn't the right move. I think Dewsbury Hall has the ability to fit into a team like that, but I don't think Chelsea's going to be the place where he gets to shine and prove that he does. I mean, I would take him back at Leicester. I don't think he'll go. I think it screams Tottenham, doesn't it? Just and he'll be good. He'll be a great player to have in your fantasy team. And I'll always look at him fondly. A little bit like Madders. Do you know what I mean? Madders isn't the sort of star. I know he's suffered with injuries and stuff, but I always look at him fondly, even when he's in a Tottenham shirt. Everyone hates Tottenham, don't they? I think it might be a little bit like that. It screams Tottenham or Villa. So yeah, but Dewsbury Hall I think is class. And I hope that if he stays at Chelsea or goes somewhere else, I hope that he does get the chance to sort of prove himself. because he is a Prem player. I love your voice notes because there's always a little couple of seconds at the start before you come in with the hello, mate. And then a couple of seconds at the end. And it's the tension of like, come on, you can end it, Chris. You've got this. Or the tension of like, when's he going to come in? Well, yeah, in terms of how Leicester look, it's difficult because you look at, we've got a good squad. But we've had a good start, I think. We will, it's going to be a struggle of a season, but we know that. There does seem to be an issue with conceded late goals, but then we've got a couple of late goals as well. I don't think we've sort of settled into any sort of rhythm yet. But I think we've shown that we can get results and that we can play. Vardy's obviously still scoring, still playing well, which is just incredible to see. I tell my girlfriend most days that I love Vardy more than her. And yeah, she really appreciates it. But yeah, how do we look? It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one to say. I don't really know. That's the thing I think with Leicester is at the moment, it feels like each game, I can't really call it. No matter who it's against, it's not like, oh, we're definitely going to win this or we're definitely going to lose this. But if the Chelsea one had to be either one, it would probably be definitely lose. But yeah, Vardy had a back injury. I don't know if he's still out for Saturday. But it does worry because as he's getting a bit older, I don't feel like we've got a solid replacement for Vardy. And I think that's a bit of a thing is without him, do we lack a goal threat? The new players are really good. Buonanotte looks awesome. Obviously, Fatau is good. Mavididi is not new, but yeah, we signed him last season, I think. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. I still don't know how this season's going to go, but that's the life of a Leicester fan. This feels like after the 7 years of glory and trophies in the Prem, this is back to the normality, the sort of chaos of what the hell, always subverting expectations. And would I take a draw? Yeah, 1000% I would take a draw. I think you'd be an idiot not to. I think, but the thing, like I said, you never know what's going to happen. I think we could go for the win. And I hope we do. I hope we don't play for a draw. That's not the. I don't think that's how the game should be played. Actually, no. But I think I would take a draw. If you said now, can you guarantee a point? I'd be like, yeah, because obviously we're not the favourites. Chelsea look good. She's got depth. They're strong. But who knows? Maybe we'll provide an upset. We'll see. But time will tell.
Proper football is back for the weekend. Yes, like you said, Chris. Cannot wait to get going again in the Premier League and try and keep us pushing for, who knows, second place. Wouldn't that be nice by the end of the year? But here we go. Big thank you to Henry for his voice note. Obviously, he's got a very busy schedule at the moment and fitting us in to do that is wonderful. Can't thank him enough. And I mean, to be honest with you, Leicester had a good start to the season, a much better start than I actually given them credit for. I had a little look actually because I wasn't entirely convinced that they gained as many points that as you sort of suggested. But yeah, it turns out they've had some good results, and the two results against Man United recently, one in the cup and one in the league, have kind of blighted that. So it's made you think they're not doing quite as well as you might think, but in actual fact, they've done okay, and I think Cooper will always keep his teams playing good, attractive football. So on that front, they'll be entertained. Leicester at 12:30 is always going to be a tricky one. I think whoever you play at 12:30 after an international break is always going to be a little bit dangerous. My only, I suppose, positive thing from it would be that you mentioned it, that Palmer didn't go and Colwill didn't go and one or two other players didn't go. So you've got probably half the squad there that didn't go on international duty that might play in the first team. And if they've been around the place just learning and listening and talking and speaking to the manager, that can never be a bad thing. So fingers crossed they're all fit. And Palmer, we thought he was a little bit maybe carrying a knock potentially against Arsenal. So fingers crossed that he's back from that and firing all cylinders. I think this has the hallmarks of being a damn squib and a dogged 2-1 victory or something. Or I do think we might come out with all guns blazing, with a team that is, like you said, playing front foot football. They look confident. They look like they're a team that are capable of beating just about anybody at the moment. So, yeah, I don't feel massively under pressure from this game. I think the only worry you have is if the team think it's too easy. If they think it's too easy, then you can cause yourself all sorts of problems. And Henry's right. I mean, Jamie Vardy, even though he's aging a little bit, he's still fast. He still knows what the goal is, and he can cause a problem. So if he manages to not be fit for the weekend, that can only be a positive for Chelsea. But I think overall, we should have too much for Leicester. I mean, Henry's right, but they take a draw. If I was in Henry's position as a Leicester fan, yeah, I'd probably be saying the same thing. Chelsea at the moment are in a good place. But as we know, Chelsea have, following Chelsea all my life, they have a tendency to kick you when you're feeling really good. So, yeah, I'm hoping for the best. I'm pretty sure that the team can deliver. I don't see this being a game where we're going to falter. I hope I don't regret to say that. But, again, football's not played on paper, the old cliche, but we have got a consistent team now that is playing more or less every week. So where it is pleasing to see is that we're not chopping and changing. And Pochettino was one of those managers that just changed it every single week. To be fair to him, he had a lot of injuries. So that's something worth speaking about again on another podcast, because Chelsea's lack of injuries at the moment is quite unbelievable, considering the last 2 years under Potter and Maresca were absolutely horrendous. We are managing to play more or less the same 10 or 11 players every single week. So that is impressive. And bear in mind, we didn't have European football then either. So it was one game a week and we still couldn't field a regular team. So I think that can only be a positive. I think Chelsea teams of years gone by under Jose and Ancelotti and those types of managers have always had a regular 11 players. And he would change it every now and again for the odd match. Remember him changing. We played Bolton Wanderers, for example, in the league, we'd always put a bigger team in against them. You didn't love the team on paper. Remember Yuri Yarosik and Robert Hoof? They would come in for these sorts of games. And Mourinho wasn't afraid to do that. And I think Maresca is a similar type of manager. I think based on the situation, I think he will bring in an occasional player that will fit the mould of the game. And I don't know with Madueke. You said you think that Neto, Palmer and Nkunku might play. I would have said yes to national break, but I think maybe there's now a sense that he might be given another go, possibly. Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think we can look at Nkunku until we're sort of blue in the face. I just don't know where his minutes are going to come from at the moment, unless, like you say, he does something a bit weird and wacky and plays Palmer out on the right-hand side and moves it all around to try and fit him in. But Maresca, to me, doesn't feel like a manager that's going to do that. So I think the jury's out there. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Neto, Noni, Palmer and Jackson again. I think that's what I'm likely in my own head to see. So hopefully all the other guys have come back. I've not heard, but I presume Caicedo and Enzo and all these guys have come back from their international duties with no injuries, which will be good. And hopefully they're feeling fit and ready to go for the next run of games leading into Christmas and the New Year. So, yeah, I'm hoping for a solid performance. I think Henry mentioned Dewsbury Hall just then. He strikes me as someone that's going to be a bit Danny Drinkwater now. I had bigger aspirations for him at the start of the season, and he's not quite panned out. But if he does come on and play at the weekend, I hope he gets a good reception from Leicester. I don't know if he will. I'm not even sure if he'll make the squad, quite frankly. But yeah, looking forward to the game. Expecting 3 points, I have to say. I think if we've got any sort of dreams of finishing the top four, we cannot really drop points to Leicester as well as Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace. We have to start making sure we're beating these teams and beating them well. So hopefully a comfortable early afternoon.
Next up, let's hear from Chelsea 90s guru and all-round great guy, Chris Wright, for his thoughts on the season so far and how Enzo Maresca's Chelsea team has surprised him.
Hi, Chris.
Yeah, Chelsea currently. I like to be balanced. I think there is definitely a lot of positives at the moment. We've actually exceeded so far this season an expectation that I've had. Enzo Maresca has settled really quickly, implemented his style very quickly, and it's clear the players know what's expected of them as well, which has been really impressive, as I said, to happen so fast. But yeah, really good. We look like a team. We look like a team. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but the last couple of years, we haven't really seen that. We actually look like a team that is trying to do something. We might lose the odd game or draw the odd game, but we actually look like a team, which is really sort of refreshing, really. So that's really good. The positions that have pleased me the most this season is definitely central midfield. I know a lot of people on social media will say Moises Caicedo was brilliant before back end of last season. I wasn't so sure. I always knew that he was a great player at Brighton. I don't go on stats. I go on what I see. And this season especially, back in the last season, he was definitely improving. But this season, wow. No one wants to jinx it. The comparisons are starting to come out with sort of Makelele and Golo Kante. He's been super impressive. So, yeah, Moises Caicedo, absolutely brilliant. And Romeo Lavia next to him has come in and done a really good job as well. Obviously, Enzo Fernandez has been kind of phased out a little bit, maybe into what some would describe as the B team, which I think is warranted, to be quite honest. I think Enzo Fernandez has needed to do more than what he has since he arrived for a big fee. Didn't have a great deal of experience behind him before he came to Chelsea, but I think most fans would agree that we'd like to see more from Enzo Fernandez, but Caicedo and Lavia in those central positions really complement each other well, and they're both so young, so really excited for that. Mark Cucurella, another player that when he first arrived, he really struggled, so it's been so good to sort of see him last season and this season when he's played looking really good, really strong, did great up against Bukayo Saka in the Arsenal game. Really, really impressive. So really pleased for him, to be quite honest. Right, negatives. Yeah, I don't like to be negative, but there's a couple of things I wanted to pick out as to where we are. Obviously, we're in third position. I mean, it is very close. I know we get excited and we start looking up the table, but if you look just behind us, there isn't a lot in it. There's only a couple of points down to like mid-table, so there's always that in the back of your mind. But overall, I'm so pleased where we are and what we're doing. I think a negative might be that, and I think I said this in the summer as well, that I think we've got too many players, and it's not surprising. You're starting to hear sort of mumblings about Christopher Nkunku, and he wants to play first team games, and Joel Felix getting a little bit frustrated by not coming on in the Arsenal game. It's just too many players, to be honest, mate. It sounds a little bit disrespectful in some ways, but you almost forget certain players are even there. You look at players like Dewsbury Hall, with all respect to him, he's a half decent player, but is he ever going to play? Is he ever going to really fit in and break into that team? I mean, I might be proved wrong, but just can't see it. What I would say though, at the moment, and I know a lot of people talk about this as well, we need a statement win. We've had positive performances at Anfield, even though we lost, we had a positive performance. We did well for periods at Old Trafford, and we did well for periods against Arsenal as well. And we matched them up. Do you know what I mean? Difficult games, difficult places to go. We look like we've got a plan. However, we need a statement win against one of those big clubs. And also, I know, again, not to be too negative, but I'm just going to say it. We are progressing. We are improving all the time. Okay. However, we will never get to the next step until we sign a top goalkeeper. The games I just mentioned there, Anfield, Sanchez I believe, was at fault for the second goal. Curtis Jones thought he could have been stronger there, gave away a penalty at Old Trafford. Beaten at his near post against Arsenal, some would say that was a difficult one to save, but I just still believe a top goalkeeper would prevent those errors from happening. And you don't want to dig players out for your club because you want them to all do well. But when I'm at Stamford Bridge, whether I'm sitting next to my dad or my son, every time Sanchez has got the ball at his feet and we're playing out from the back, I just feel so uncomfortable. It's quite an uncomfortable watch. I think we can all accept, when you concede a goal that's sort of a great goal, but when we're gifting goals away or putting ourselves in really sort of vulnerable positions, it's just so incredibly frustrating. I'm going to finish on a positive, and mine is Wesley Fofana and Levi Colwill. Now, I'm not blinded. They've both made a couple of mistakes here and there, but I think it's very refreshing from Maresca that he's been consistently playing those two in the Premier League to build up a partnership. Okay, so some people might have a little moan and groan about one of them or one of their performances here and there, but ultimately what we don't want is to keep mixing it up all the time, especially in the Premier League. So let them make a couple of mistakes. I haven't got a problem with that. So yeah, up the Chelsea, mate.
So the title of this episode and this whole segment was inspired by a question from journalist and Chelsea fan Owen Phillips. So Owen, let's bring you in for your question.
Evening, chaps. I've just been thinking more and more about a discussion that came up a couple of times in the last few weeks on the pods, was about the sort of shithousery going on, and got me thinking about what you reckon is our best shithousery 11. I'll give you two absolute definites. One obvious, Dennis Wise, which is, clear and obvious, isn't it? There's no debating that. He's probably the captain, but one that you probably think of, but is 100% nailed as far as I'm concerned. Otherwise, I'm not playing if you don't include him. It's Ricardo Carvalho, surely, but can you fill out? But yeah, be interested to see what you reckon. Cheers, bye.
This is a great question. I mean, I'm really pleased you sent this in, actually, because, as soon as you sort of asked that, I was like, oh, yeah, I'd love to get involved there. So, Chris, you're going to do the goalkeeper because you came up with a good one, and there haven't been too many in that position, but you've got a very good one to come up. I'm going to do the back four. Chris is going to do the midfield four, and we're going to do a striker each. So we're going to play 4-4-2 in this formation. Starting at left back, I'm going to choose, in my shithouse 11, Graham Lasseau. Graham Lasseau was a player that basically hated everyone. Any right winger, right midfield player, in his era, they played basically 4-4-2 a lot of the time. So I can remember him having arguments with Beckham and Danny Mills, and there was so many people that he used to row with. Lasseau famously threw his shirt at the Chelsea manager when being substituted in his first stint at Chelsea, and the crowd went absolutely ballistic, and Ken Bates sold him shortly after. So he had a bit of a reputation of being a bit mad at times, and when he came back for his second stint, he'd really matured. He'd matured as in he was a great Chelsea player, but he still had that streak in him. His tackling was brilliant, and then he would do some horrendous ones, a bit like Julian Dix. Some really terrible tackles over the ball, and always rowing, always in the referee's ear. And he would just do silly little things, like he would throw the ball at the winger's head when they weren't looking and stuff like that. He was just not a very nice guy to play against. So he gets my vote at left back. At centre back, you can't look any further than Antonio Rudiger. Rudiger was a nutter. I mean, when we signed him, it took him probably at least a year or two to get into the side. He was woefully poor. And I was like, what have we bought here? And then after maybe a year or two, he calmed down. He got into the side, might have been some injuries or something, and he played his way into the team. Then all of a sudden, he started doing these mad things and almost like mocking of the opposition, which I find just, you see him do it for Germany and even now at Real Madrid. dare I say, almost like goose stepping past opponents, like pretending to run past them because he was quicker than them. So he would run slowly, pretend to run slowly. And again, always in the ear of the referee. And he would like open his big wide eyes to the centre forwards that would come near him. He'd like give that kind of look as if to say, I'm going to kill you. So Rudiger definitely gets in at centre back for me. His playing partner has to be Frank Leboeuf for Chelsea. What a player. He was a joy to watch. But for all his good play, he did some strange, mad, bad decisions at times, gave away a few goals. But his bullet-free kicks and his just basically freedom to play the game. He was basically like an attacking midfield player playing at centre-back. But I'll never forget games. So we played Leeds at home where we were losing the game and he just decided at 1-0, I forget the player from the front, Eric Bakker rings a bell, and he just walked up to him and just stamped straight on him when he was laying on the floor, right in front of the referee, didn't care less, and obviously he got a straight red card for it and off he went. Leboeuf had this sort of streak in him of just doing these really mad, crazy things, and again, always chatting to players, always getting involved with, again, in his era, like players like Carnu and Henry and that sort of ilk of player. And he just didn't care. He would always be at them, giving them shit, and obviously reminding them that he was a World Cup winner, like he always used to. At right back, I was going to go for Chopper Harris, Ron Harris, because really he has to get in any Chelsea shithouse team. But if we're going to keep it in the Premier League era, I'll park him for now and choose somebody else. But Ron Harris would have got in on any other team. So I'm going to choose Azpilicueta, Dave, as we all know him. I think Reece James was in here for a shout. He could be in the future. I even think Jose Bosinga was a bit of a wind-up merchant. Ivanovic sort of did it with play, not necessarily with like... He wasn't a master of dark arts, Ivanovic. He just used to sort of hit you and you'd stay down. But I think Azpilicueta, I've got some Spurs mates who hate him. They absolutely hate him because he would do little things where he would always be, the moment there was a little touch on him, he would roll over and like as if he'd been shot. And then it would take ages to take the throw in maybe, or there'd be something where Willian or Hazard would get the slightest touch on them and he'd be straight over waving the imaginary yellow card and always in the referee's ear. These are the little details that maybe everyone doesn't pick up on. Azpilicueta was so good at it. I mean, I don't love this side of the game, but it is a part of the game. And yeah, for me, he was someone that was always just the right side or the wrong side, depends how you look at it, of that line where you thought to yourself, oh, I can see why he really irritates opposing fans and managers too, because you often see when we were winning games and the ball would be near the dugout and there'd be like maybe a minute to go or 2 minutes to go, he'd always walk over to the ball and the manager's like throwing at him, come on, take the throw, and he's like, no, I'll just take it at my own time. Then they have a little row with the manager, and our manager would get involved and the benches would get involved, and he was that sort of play. He would always wind the opposition up really well. So that's my back four: Lasseau, Leboeuf, Rudiger and Azpilicueta. I will choose my centre forward very shortly. Over to you, Chris.
What a great question. Yeah, thanks for this, Owen. So, yeah, goalkeeper was tricky. And I think we had a little conflage off air. And I was like, no one jumps to mind really. Because if you think of the best Chelsea goalkeepers that we've had, obviously Petr Cech was amazing, but he wasn't really the type. He's a lovely guy. He's in the nice guy team, really. We had obviously Courtois, but this isn't a snake 11. It's a Shithousery 11, so he couldn't be in it. So not easy, even going back further, I couldn't really think of any, but the one who jumps to mind is Kepa. And I think when I think of it, what I really think of with Kepa is penalty shootouts. And actually, I'd say there's good and bad examples of this. So let's go with the bad one, then in with a good one. The League Cup final against Liverpool, where obviously Kepa was brought on for the shootout. Understandably so, actually, given his penalty record was very good. And against Liverpool, he did, to be fair, do everything to try and put the Liverpool players off. And I'm a big fan of that, actually, in shootouts. I always think any little advantage you can have. I take penalties myself at a slightly lower level, at Sunday League level. And I always think anything the goalkeeper can do to get in your head, anything, any little detail, I think can make a bit of a difference. And so the fact when you have a goalkeeper doing that, I do much prefer it. And that day, I mean, the biggest one against Liverpool in that final was basically he knew where Van Dijk would go, so he moved all the way over, pointed where he was going to do it, and then annoyingly, he looked like a mug because Van Dijk put it in the top corner. He got nowhere near it. And then obviously he looked even more of a mug when he ended up blasting his own penalty over. So that wasn't a great example, but it was the kind of character he was. And I'll flip it to a really good example, which was when we won the Super Cup, which I think might have been the same season actually, in 2021 against Villarreal. I mean, firstly, how long ago does that feel? Like, it's basically 3 years ago. It feels like 10, doesn't it? It feels like a different club. But if you remember, Kepa got brought on for Mendy very late in the game under Tuchel. This was not long after we won the Champions League. That's why we were there. And Kepa was brilliant in that final. And again, he was doing every little trick to get in the players' minds, delaying it. He had his little bottle with everything written down. He was really getting in their heads. And he saved 2 penalties and we won the Super Cup. So I like to see that sort of stuff in a goalkeeper on penalties. And the thing about Kepa, I've never been his biggest fan as a player. I've always thought he's got his short arm syndrome and I think was a bit of a liability at times. But actually as a personality, he's meant to be very good. And a lot was said actually, I think around the time of Lampard and then Tuchel and you could actually see it, that when we won the Champions League that year, he was like one of the biggest supporters on the bench, really driving people forward, talking and stuff. So he obviously has a fantastic personality about him, Kepa. And I think you're probably seeing that at Bournemouth, where he's obviously gone in, they're having a pretty good season and he's a real vocal leader at the back. So understated in that respect, but maybe a surprise choice, but that's who I'm going for in goal, Kepa. Midfield, I will rattle through fairly quickly. The first one's the easy one really, and it is Dennis Wise. Anyone who grew up in the era that we did knows that Dennis Wise was almost the all-star Premier League leader of shithousery, winding up every opposition player and fan with everything he did. Probably the most legendary incident would be he was in a scuffle on the ground with Nicky Butt. He pulled Nicky Butt's leg hair and then Butt kicked out at him. Wisey went down like he'd been shot and Nicky Butt got sent off. And Chelsea beat Man United 5-0 that day in 1999. But he would do stuff like that all the time, Wisey. He'd wind players up, he'd be in the referee's ear, and he would not be shy of making a big tackle himself. And yeah, he got himself sent off a fair few times. But he's got to be captain of this team. Alongside him, not as easy as some of these choices. One of them is a bit of a cheat because he is a Premier League player, but he didn't play for Chelsea in the Premier League era that I can remember, and that's Vinnie Jones. But I think if you're doing Shithousery 11 and Vinnie Jones has played for your club, then he just has to be in the team because he was the godfather of Shithousery, really. And that famous photo of him grabbing Gazza's balls, defending a corner, I think kind of sums up what he was all about. So he has to be in the team for me. I would also go with a more modern choice, which is Cesc Fabregas. I think Fabregas was different to the two I've just mentioned. He was a bit cuter in some of the stuff he did. But again, he's kind of that... He knew what he was doing. He was a winner, Fabregas, and he knew any trick he could do to kind of get under the noses of the opposition, get in the referee's ear and all that kind of stuff he was really good at. And if you're having an incident for this team, then a classic Fabregas incident is obviously clipping the ball perfectly and hitting the referee square in the head away at West Brom, which got himself sent off, but it was kind of worth it for comic value that day. So let's give Fabregas the one for that one. And then final one I'm going to put in, it's a little bit of a cheat because he was mainly known as a centre-back for us, but he did play in midfield under Rafa Benitez, and that has got to be David Luiz. And David Luiz, again, I think it goes without saying the reasons he's in the team. If you're putting a Shithousery 11, then he's got to be in there. And the classic moment for me is against Sunday's opponents, Man United. I think it might have been the day we beat them last, actually, when we won 1-0 up there. And there's this cracking moment when he's down on the floor in the corner. The United fans are moaning at him, telling him to get up, and he has this little smirk on his face, knowing that he was just delaying it. And that's what this team is all about. So, yeah, you're in it, David. And then before I hand over to Joe, for his striker, I've got to put a striker in, and I'm going to go with Didier Drogba. And Drogba really, for me, epitomises, I think he's going to represent that era of Chelsea. So you could put Lampard, Terry or Drogba in it really, because they're all so good at playing the game smart, knowing what it needs to be done to win, whether that was getting in the referee's ear, taking turns, as Joe's talked about before, to get that cheeky book in, to be the one who kind of goes and complains to the referee. And obviously Drogba would wind up opposition players and fans alike with his antics, whether that was going down sometimes too easily, putting a big tackle in himself, and just not being messed around. And I think Drogba would be a good spearhead for this Shithousery 11. So yeah, Didier Drogba, and he'll be up front with a man that I know exactly who Joe's going to name. So yeah, over to you, Joe.
As my striker, I'm going to choose Diego Costa. Has there been a more shithouse player in the Premier League? I'm not entirely sure. This guy had everything. He'd be casually minding his own business, and suddenly, whack, he would just like completely take out. The centre-back would get up, he'd want to fight Costa. Costa would go toe-to-toe, he'd get his chest out, and it'd be chest-to-chest. They couldn't headbutt each other because they both get sent off. And then 10 seconds later, the centre-back would come through Costa from behind. He'd get a yellow card. Obviously, Costa's done his job. He's now thinking, well, you can't touch me for the next 60, 70 minutes, so I've got one over on you. And then there's little things. He would like pinch people when he would stand on their toes, and he would like poke them and prod them at corners. And obviously, when he scored goals, he would always kind of celebrate in front of their faces. I remember him screaming in someone's face. Might have been at home to someone like Blackburn or Bolton. He was literally screaming in their face when he scored. I think everybody that played against him hated him. I can't imagine anybody liking him. He's recently just come back from like almost come out of retirement to play in, I think, like a Brazilian he played like an under 17s, 19s game or something. It was, I remember the news story, and he had a punch up with an 18-year-old. I mean, the guy just can't help himself. He's definitely a screw loose somewhere there, but he was massively brilliant for Chelsea. I mean, what a player Diego Costa was. Loved every minute of him. Those seasons under Conte in particular, the goals he scored are mind-blowing. Again, we've said it before this podcast. He scored outstanding football goals, like brilliant goals. And that partnership with Fabregas that he had was just unbelievable. But Diego Costa was the biggest shithouse player we've ever had. And if he doesn't make a Chelsea 11, then I don't know who does.
We finish the episode, as always, with our best and worst memories of that fixture, and I'm doing this week Leicester away. So I will start with my best, actually, this one, because I think chronologically makes more sense. Now we normally do it the other way around, but gonna wind the clock right back to November 1997. So this era of Chelsea, for any people of my age, I'm in my early 40s, was such a special time. It was that cosmopolitan era. Vialli, Zola, Di Matteo, Frank Leboeuf, Desailly, etc. And this was a real special day for me because I would have been 14, maybe just turned 15 years old, and it was a game that I went to. So it would have been one of my sort of first proper away days, really. I think I'd been to 2 or 3 big away days before that, but this was an away trip going with a very good friend, Andy Lee, and my godfather, Tony Lee, and I think a couple of others might have been with us as well. And just a real magical day. I think would have been 15, and a couple of beers as well on the train, which was all very exciting at that age. And it was just an amazing sort of time. I think whenever you go and watch Chelsea, particularly away from home, those who've done it, it is special. Of course, going to Stamford Bridge is pretty much one of my favourite things to do, but going to an away game with your team there's something really magical about it. You're travelling on the train, as we did for that one up there, and you see loads of other Chelsea fans obviously making the same trip up north, and there is just something really special, I think, about being in a stadium when you are the minority number to kind of really sing more, and the atmosphere is always amazing, and it's just very special. So those sort of away days are always amazing, and that one really always stuck out to me because it was obviously of that age, one of the first that I'd done. And the game itself was amazing. So Chelsea won the game 4-2, and just listening off the goal scorers that day kind of give you the idea of kind of what that team was like. Gianfranco Zola scored 2. He scored a header, believe it or not, in the first half, and then scored a really lovely goal in the 90th minute to kind of confirm victory. Gus Poyet scored a goal, good finish, but again a header, and Torandre Flo scored a goal after Zola had hit a 30-yard free kick against the post and come out to him. And it was just an amazing day. Filbert Street was the old Leicester Stadium, so it only held about 20,000. It was right in the middle of Leicester. Proper old school English football stadium, and just really, really special. And I always remember like the home fans were right next to where you were as Chelsea fans. We were kind of penned in the corner and never condoning violence, but I remember them throwing coins at us, and probably to some of the Chelsea fans, not me included, I didn't have any money to spare, throwing coins back, and someone coming on the tannoy and telling everyone to stop throwing coins. And it just had that rough and readiness of a proper old school football away day that you probably don't ever feel it's quite the same in a modern stadium, I don't think. I've been to Leicester's new stadium a few times as well, actually, and obviously a really nice stadium that it is, that just doesn't have that magic of a proper old stadium, which of course there aren't that many of now. And obviously they're often in the middle of the city centre and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, real special game, that one. I watched about the highlights actually in preparation for this note, and yeah, it all brought it right back, all the memories of it. And yeah, just a real classic Chelsea memory, and one that always brings a smile when I think of it. So the opposite of bringing a smile when I remember it is the worst Leicester v Chelsea memory that came to mind. And actually this one came to me pretty quickly when I thought of it, because it was one of those seasons where everything went wrong for Chelsea, and this game was really the pinnacle, because it was the 2015-2016 season. Chelsea had actually been to Leicester just about 6 months beforehand, won a pivotal game which would really help us win the league with just a couple of games to spare. And we went back in November that year, and we were dismantled by Leicester that night, and it would end up being Jose Mourinho's last game as Chelsea manager in his second spell. We wouldn't have known at that point that Leicester were doing well, but who would have known that they'd go on to win arguably the most incredible Premier League of ever in terms of a football story, and arguably one of the greatest football stories of all time, let's be fair. And the goal scorers for Leicester that day kind of summed up that season, really, because it was Jamie Vardy from a brilliant Mahrez cross, and then Mahrez himself, absolutely, to be fair, tearing Azpilicueta to shreds at the back post and just curling an absolute beauty past, I think it was Begovic and Gauci for Chelsea. We got a late goal back with Remy, but lost the game 2-1. And again, it's one of those games I remember watching on TV, and it just felt, a really weird and miserable time watching the team. It was again, when you watch the highlights back, it's a really strong Chelsea team. The players, when you look at them, are pretty much the team that won the league the year before. You've got Costa, Matic, Terry, Cahill, all of those big names pretty much still there. But we were just on this terrible run, and Mourinho came out in the post-match interview, which is probably one of the most famous parts of that, and just looked beaten. And I think he famously said Chelsea wouldn't even get top 4 that season, and he didn't think Abramovich would sack him, but he kind of said, who knows? And yeah, he was gone within a few days. So yeah, an easy one to think of when it comes to bad memories. And yeah, I'm laughing because I'm thinking what a sour note this is to end the podcast on. But I'm very confident that won't happen on Saturday in terms of our manager being sacked after the result, whatever the result is. And actually, as we've been saying on the podcast, I'm feeling pretty positive about the game generally, and hopefully Chelsea can continue to have good memories at Leicester, where we have a pretty good record. So yeah, they're my best and worst, and yeah, here's hoping a good win on Saturday, and we might have a new best to look back on. Come on, you Chelsea. Those were the Chelsea notes for this week. If you enjoyed the podcast, do us a favour and share it with a fellow Blue. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review wherever you're listening. Wherever you may be, stay carefree, and remember, every little thing's gonna be alright.